Hi, my name is Charlene Margot, and I'm the founder and director of the Parent Education Series here in the Sequoia Union High School District. We started this program 14 years ago with 25 people in the library at Menlo Atherton, and we've really grown, more than 40,000 attendees in the last 10 years, but I always want to start out by thanking you all for coming tonight, especially if there are a few students in the audience. I know everybody is busy. Woodside High School is really busy tonight, so again, thank you. Just your being here shows that you care about your kids, because we know from the research that parent engagement is real. That's what you're doing. Parent participation actually raises academic achievement levels for all students, and so again, I want to thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. You're in for a really great treat with our presenter, Lynn O'Shaughnessy. Before I get started, I want to say a couple things. One is we have in the audience with us tonight Woodside's college advisor, Zarina Margot. I'm going to have Zarina stand up. Hi, Zarina. And we wanted to let you know that March into College begins on March 6th. So every Wednesday night for 4 weeks, I think that's right, there will be events here at the high school around the college admission process and financial aid. So be sure to join her for March into College. Then as you came in, everybody was handed a very short survey, just about 5 questions. I would love it if you would answer this, fill it out, hand it back at the end of the presentation. It helps us with our planning for next year. I promise I read every one, so your thoughts and suggestions all go directly back to me, and I keep track of all the responses. It helps with our funding and provides research into topics and suggestions for next year. Okay, let's get started. Lynn has a very new presentation tonight, hot off the press, right, Lynn? So we are excited, right? She's joining us from San Diego. Okay, here we go. Let me tell you a little bit about Lynn. Lynn O'Shaughnessy is a nationally recognized college expert who is a higher ed journalist, speaker, and educator. Her chief goal is to help families with teenagers become smart college shoppers as they search for schools. Lynn also educates high school counselors, college consultants, and financial advisors who need to understand how they can assist families with evaluating their choices and helping to bring down the cost of college. Lynn will actually be joining Zarina and her counselors here Thursday morning at Woodside, and she does that as a part of her presentation, so it's very generous and really helps your school. Lynn is a former Los Angeles Times reporter. She has written about college issues for such national outlets as the New York Times, Consumer Reports, National Public Radio, Money Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal. She is also the author of the Amazon bestseller, The College Solution, a guide for everyone looking for the right school at the right price. And she writes about college on her popular blog, The College Solution, which attracts roughly 1 million visitors a year. She is a proud native of St. Louis, Missouri, and an alumna of the distinguished University of Missouri in Columbia, where she graduated from the nation's oldest journalism school. Lynn is a resident of San Diego, has been for the past 27 years, who is also the proud mom of 2 college graduates who are thriving in their adult lives. Please join me in a really nice welcome for our presenter, Lynn O'Shaughnessy.
I want to start today by asking everybody a question. How many of you are stressed about or worried about your kids, the whole college process, or any part of it? Like, oh, dumb, right, yeah, everybody's raising their hand. Sometimes when I ask that question, people, when they feel stressed, they raise their hand and I haven't finished the sentence yet. And there's, of course, obvious reasons why you're stressed out about this. I mean, you're worried about the insane cost of college, right? I love that little illustration I pulled off the internet. You're worried about paying too much. You're worried about blowing up your retirement nest egg, paying for college, for goodness sake, because some schools today, it's crazy, will cost you for one single bachelor's degree, full price would be $300,000. You're worried about, your child, you making the wrong choices, and of course you're worried that your child will be rejected from the schools he or she really wants to go to, right? The good news, though, is it doesn't have to be as stressful or as expensive if you become an educated college consumer. And I got to tell you, most parents do not do that. Most parents don't try to educate themselves. I'm going to try to cram all this in. in the time I have, but this is what we're going to go over. You know, why you shouldn't allow your team to control the college process, a realistic look at those golden ticket schools, understanding the realities of college pricing, winning awards from state schools and private colleges, ideas for building a college list, why you should be using net price calculators and an EFC calculator, assets, including home equity, how it impacts financial aid, how marital status impacts financial aid, and a tool to determine what admission factors a specific college cares about. Okay, we're going to get, I promise, we're going to try to get all this in. So, oops, why isn't this? Oh, connection, it's not connecting, okay. Okay, well, I'm just going to manually do this then. Okay, so for attending today, the school is going to send everybody who signed up, and frankly, you know, you can send it to everybody if you want. You know, I don't care. I want everybody to be able to get as much out of it. And this will actually, this is a resource guide I created for my own class, but it will dive deeper into some of the issues about how different types of schools price themselves and who gets money, who gets merit scholarships. There's certain types of schools, as you're going to learn, that give more merit scholarships. There are others that give more need-based aid. So that this is like a 32-page resource guide that you're going to get. Okay, it'll just come to you in the email. For those of you who would like to, I'd be happy to send you something else, which through my email, which is a resource guide, 100 questions to ask when researching colleges. So for any of you who want to get that, I'll just pass this around and maybe Charlene can get that started. But while she's grabbing this, I wanted to say that I understand how you feel about the stress because I experienced it myself with my own two kids. I started thinking about college when my daughter Caitlin was little. But the big time stress didn't really hit me until Caitlin had started high school in San Diego. She might have been in the top 25% of her class at a girls' school she attended, but I wasn't even sure. I think she probably was in the top third, but whatever it wasn't going to get her into the school that she thought she wanted to go to. Like a lot of kids today, forever, students really have very little knowledge about the schools out there. And she thought, oh, I'll just go to Berkeley. That's where her dad had gotten his undergraduate degree. And, you know, kids know about UCs and Cal States, but I knew that it wasn't going to happen because she wasn't in the top 10% of her class. And so I started stressing out about that. And then one day somebody told me about this book called Colleges That Change Lives. It's kind of old now, but I was reading it and I thought, wow, there's a lot of interesting schools out there that I've never heard of. And if you're interested in smaller schools, you want to see what other types of schools there are, I urge you to read it, even though, you know, it's not, I think it last published in 2012. But it got me started. It got me thinking, oh, maybe I should throw a wider net with my daughter, and then ultimately with my son, and when looking for schools, instead of fishing in the same little pond that a lot of Californians fish in. So I happen to be a personal finance journalist and work at the LA Times, and I thought I covered just about every financial topic under the sun, but I hadn't written about what I like to call late-stage college planning, which is when you're almost done saving for college, how do you stretch what you've managed to save as far as possible? So that's what I decided to do. And I, at the time, had no idea what her chances were for scholarships or financial aid. She had about a 3.4 GPA, and we didn't know what her SAT scores were going to be. I wasn't sure if she could get anything, but it turns out she had a lot of opportunities. She ultimately got institutional scholarships, merit scholarships from several schools, and attended one that called Juniata College. Has anybody heard of this school? Okay, one person, all right. the college counselor. So there's a lot of schools out there like that, okay? Most people can't even pronounce this school. She had a tremendous experience at the school. She also spent a year at University of Barcelona. She was a Spanish major. Caitlin ended up graduating, started actually while she was in college with a toy company as a social media intern, and ultimately rose in the ranks to become the marketing director of a toy company, and she founded in 2017 her own company, MaximalSpace.com, that helps families who want to put granny flats build playing fields on their property, and she's done exceedingly well. My son Ben, who's 3 years younger, earned his bachelor's degree in math from Beloit College. How many have heard of Beloit? Okay, a few more. Usually a few more from Beloit in Wisconsin. Got his master's degree at the University of Denver before he was 23 years old, and he was a math teacher for a couple of years in Denver, and then decided to take a sabbatical at a Buddhist monastery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which I guess that can happen to you when you teach at a public high school, I guess. Ultimately, we were able to pay for our kids through, merit scholarships the kids got, and we had saved for college, and we were able to pay then monthly. In fact, we paid monthly for 7 years, and we were celebrating when it was finally over. 7 years of college payments between two kids. And so what I like to do is share with people is how they can do something similar, have really good outcomes for their kids, and not kill yourself financially. So I was, as a personal finance journalist, I found college planning to be like the final frontier. I mean, no other aspect, I think, of finances, of a family's finances, has been ignored like this has been. So that's how I ended up ditching everything that I've been writing about personal finance, like IRAs and stock investing, efficient markets, all that stuff. I stopped writing about it and just focused on college. So I have a blog, The College Solution. I've written for a lot of publications. I also have an online class that I teach this stuff to parents all over the country. So that's where I'm at. Now, so let's get into these tips that I want to share with you. The first one, I'm very passionate about this, is don't let your teenager drive the college process, which is probably not what you've heard. But if money is an issue, and it almost always is, you must be involved from the start. I would stay away from this approach. Oh, we're just going to let our kid apply wherever they want, whenever you want, honey, and we'll see what happens. That can be a total disaster. Here are reasons why you should not have your kid in the driver's seat. They can create a college list based on peer pressure, immaturity, lack of concern about cost, reliance on college rankings, and not knowing what they want. Okay. I'm going to give you an example. Actually, somebody who is a relative of mine who lives in the Bay Area, who's in commercial real estate, and one of his kids was wanting to go to NYU. And I told him, the dad, I said, look, I would not let him go to NYU, apply to NYU, unless you're prepared to pay full price for the school, because NYU is one of the rare, it's like a unicorn almost in the college world, because it has terrible financial aid and terrible merit scholarships. Usually you don't have that combination. You have, one can be terrible, but usually not both. So, but he said, oh, well, we'll just see how it goes. We'll let him apply. Well, I knew what happened. Of course, he got in, and then the dad acknowledged that it was it's going to be a $300,000 mistake, right? He's going to pay through the nose, and he is paying that. Kids loves it there, but, was that the smartest use of $300,000, particularly in his business that goes up and down a lot financially? Here's another thing that can happen when you just have a hands-off approach and don't look at when your child is creating lists the financial implications of the schools you're picking. Can anybody see what's potentially wrong with this list? Anybody? Huh? Yeah, except for Berkeley. But yeah, they're reach schools, right? Like it's hard to get in. And this was actually somebody I know, okay, these are the schools she applied to. These are the two schools she got into. Both California schools. The problem is she was from Pennsylvania. So UC Berkeley was going to be prohibitively expensive because that's what the UCs do. They want to, charge a ton of money to non-residents, right? That's why they're accepting so many of them. And Chapman, okay, which she ultimately went to Chapman where she got some merit scholarship money. But this is a kid who had a lot of need. Brilliant kid. Was this necessarily the best school for this child? Shouldn't she have had more options than that? So that's the sort of thing that can happen when you just let your kid apply wherever he or she wants. Now, you might be saying yes, but some of these schools, they're worth the extra money, right? Or you should be aiming for these schools, So I want to address this golden ticket issue, Because there's a lot of parents in affluent neighborhoods that, like people around here, that think aren't elite schools worth whatever price we have to pay. And not necessarily. Oftentimes, no, it's not worth killing yourself financially if your kid does get into these kind of schools. Research has shown that bachelor's degrees from elite institutions, Ivy League schools for instance, boost salaries of low-income, minority, being Hispanics, African-American kids, but not affluent students. Not. In fact, there's two big studies I'm going to show you, a link to a New York Times story in a minute that will, if you want to go look at these studies. But the first study that was done in the late 1990s looked at students who had graduated from Ivy League schools and those who were accepted into the Ivies but attended other institutions. And ultimately, they made the same salaries. It didn't matter if they went to these fancy schools or not. They all made the same. Okay, this was kids who actually started in 1976. Then, the second study, which was released in 2011, looked at students who graduated from the Ivies, as well as students who got rejected from all of the Ivies, but shared the same high academic profiles and also were making the same salaries in their careers. Okay? And the second study from the same authors also looked at that original study and looked at these graduates from 1976 and went all the way up to 2007 and saw, once again, that these cohorts were making the same salaries. This is there's been a lot written in the press over the past years about this, and this is the New York Times article about these two landmark studies if you want to look at them. Now, interestingly enough, there was another study that was just released, I think it was either this December or January, and they wanted to, these are researchers from University of Virginia and Virginia Tech, and I can't remember the other school, but they wanted to see, okay, was that, those first two landmark studies, is that really still holding, or was that really a legit study? So when they looked at it, they found that almost all the same results. Affluent white students, males, who attended elite schools, it didn't matter if they went to the most elite schools or not, controlling for grades and test scores, they're making the same salaries. The only difference, and also minorities, low-income kids, they did get a boost in salary. The only thing that deviated from those original studies was that women who are affluent, from affluent families, well-off families, and you're controlling for GPA and test scores, they did make more money for going to these elite schools, but it's not because they were not making any more money per hour. It was just they stayed in the workforce longer, and they had a little less chance of getting married. So I think it's a very powerful for everybody who thinks, we have to go to these elite schools and the kids have to kill themselves, and all the mental health issues that come from this. It's not necessary, it's just not. This is something I hope that will sink in. SAT scores are a very high predictor of future salaries. That's why it's easy to argue that Yale and Harvard don't make their students winners. They pick winners to attend their schools. Students with superior test scores by virtue of growing up in high-income households are more likely to earn higher salaries in their careers. That's just how it is. It's ironic that wealthy parents are most likely to stress about their children getting into elite schools, even though their children are more likely to be successful in their careers regardless of where they get their bachelor's degree. Okay? You can see I'm passionate about this. And one other thing, and this is one I interviewed a while ago when I wrote about this. I interviewed Alan Kruger when I was I used to be a college columnist for CBS Market Watch, and he said the average SAT score at the most selective school that students apply to is a better predictor of their future earnings than the average SAT score at the college they attend. Okay. So anyway, I hope some of you can just kind of take a deep breath about this whole, trophy school thing. It's not that they couldn't do well at trophy schools, not that you couldn't necessarily apply to these, but they're not the be-all and end-all. Okay? there's been a lot of suggestions that besides being from an affluent family, which can, will go far for most kids, student success in college is also tied to whatever they do at whatever school they end up in. Right? This is a blog post that I did a few years ago when Gallup and Purdue came up with a survey of 30,000 people, Americans, who had gotten bachelor's degrees, and from various types of schools, elite, public, flagships, research universities, private, liberal arts colleges, non-selective state schools, all sorts of schools. And what they determined was, they wanted to see, was there a certain type of school where you're more likely to graduate and be happy in your career and happy in your life. Okay? And what they determined were these factors that made most difference. Did you have at least one professor who made you excited about learning? Did your professors care about you as a person? Did you have a mentor who encouraged you to pursue your goals? Did you have a project that took a semester or more to complete? Did you have an internship? Were you extremely active in extracurriculars? Only, sadly, 6% of, total, when you add all those up, only 3% of people said, oh yeah, I did all those, right? But the more they said yes to, the more likely they were happy in their jobs and their careers. And I used my daughter in the blog post because she would have answered yes to all of those. When she graduated from her little liberal arts college, the president of the college told me, wow, Kaylin has squeezed the absolute most out of her liberal arts education. And today she's using her skills. She started her little company more than a year ago and is going gangbusters with her little maximalspace.com, and she has contractors and architects clamoring to work with her, and she's doing really well. And it didn't matter that she went to a school called Juniata College. In fact, she just had an event on Saturday at University of San Diego for all these people who wanted to build granny flats, and that's the kind of audience that she could pack in. So anyway, once again, I think your kids, most of the kids here are going to do well no matter where they go to school. So end of that, I'm going to stop talking about that subject. Now, I want to talk about the reality of college pricing. Colleges are priced like airplane tickets. Everybody pays a different price. These are the major sources of money. Okay, colleges are the biggest source of money. So especially for higher income families, really even for many families, whether you're affluent or you need financial aid, colleges are often going to be the biggest source of it. And that's what I'm going to focus on tonight. I don't have time to talk about the federal sources. And also, as you can see, private scholarships are the tiniest source of money. A lot of people think, oh, all I need is, my kid's going to get a lot of private scholarships. Not likely. So as I said, the big money usually comes from schools themselves. At private colleges and universities, 89% of students receive some type of aid, whether it's financial aid or merit scholarship money. And this was a survey done every year. Gallup and Inside Higher Ed, which is a higher ed trade publication, surveys college admission administrators from state and private schools, and every year most schools are saying they are not meeting their freshman goals. Of course, the most famous schools are, but most everybody else is not, and that's why most schools are forced to give discounts to get kids into their schools. So I want to talk first about how state schools make their awards, and then we'll talk about private schools. Okay? State schools will often be the cheapest choice for residents, but it won't always be the case. Now, in California, the University of California and the Cal State schools give need-based aid, but very little merit scholarship money. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples. Like at Berkeley, only 348 students out of over 6,300 freshmen get a merit scholarship, meaning they don't have any financial need. The average award is less than $6,000. At UCLA, 170 out of more than 6,000 freshmen got a merit award, and it's less than $5,000. Cal Poly, 588 out of over 4,300, and the average is a little under 3,000. So this isn't a lot of money. Most kids, if you think, oh, my kid's really brilliant and gets into a UC, he or she's going to get a merit scholarship, don't count on it. It's highly unlikely. Now, what the state of California, what they put their money into, okay, and what, if you're going to get financial aid at state schools here, it's more likely going to be in the Cal Grant, okay? And the Cal Grant is great if you qualify for it because it covers the tuition and fees up to $12,630 if your child goes to a UC, CSU up to $5,742, and if you get into a private college in California, the Cal Grant covers more than $9,000, okay? This is the Cal Grant limits. So if you are, say, a family of 4, you can't have an adjusted gross income of over $102,500, right? If you make more than that, you're not getting a Cal Grant, okay? And what does that mean? It means you're likely, if you do not get a Cal Grant, it's highly likely you will pay full price for a state school here, okay? And so what you need to do is compare what you would pay full price at a state school in California and compare that to private colleges as well as state universities outside of California. Here's an example of somebody actually whose mom actually took my class, and her son had thought, you know, he was going to apply to UCs, which he did, but he really wasn't wild about going to such a big school. And they were not going to qualify for the Cal Grant, right? And I've told them that, hey, you know, just because you don't qualify for the Cal Grant doesn't mean you can't get financial aid at some other schools, particularly those that say they need 100% of financial need. And there are about 70 schools in this country that say they need 100% of financial need of their students. And one of them is Skidmore College, which is where James went. He's from San Diego. He went to Skidmore. His parents did qualify for need-based aid at a school that now costs over $70,000 a year. They saved over the sticker price of the school over $200,000, and they paid less than they would have paid at a UC. And they were thrilled. James came to, he majored in computer science and then come back to San Diego and has a great job at Intuit. So, for those of you looking for financial aid, if you're looking out of state, you need to understand that state universities typically only offer financial aid to their own residents. Okay, they rarely offer need-based aid to outsiders. Okay, but what they do provide for outsiders and affluent residents is merit scholarship money, and there is a lot of merit scholarship money at state universities, just not in this state. Okay. California state schools are an outlier. Most state schools elsewhere have lots of merit scholarships. Now, it's usually easier to determine who qualifies for merit awards at state universities because they're typically tied to grade point average and standardized test scores. So typically, because they don't have the luxury of looking at it really holistically at a kid. There's too many students, and so they just go, what's your GPA and test scores? You can find these scholarships typically, oftentimes, right on the school's website. It will say, this is the GPA you need. So just Google the name of the school and scholarships and see what you find. This is just one that I pulled off the internet. It was from University of Utah, and it's very, it's great because it says which ones residents can have, which ones non-residents can have, and you can learn more by clicking. Now, for those of you whose kids are interested in state schools outside of California, I'm sorry these columns didn't line up, but what you need to know is that the schools that have those brand names, public schools, they're just like the private schools. They're not going to give much merit scholarship because they don't need to, because rich students come to their schools no matter what. Okay, so for the big name schools, they're going to charge more for non-residents. You can see like University of Michigan and Virginia, William and Mary, Vermont, schools that also have fun destinations like Boulder and Vermont and Arizona for kids from back east, or, California. Kids love to go to Arizona. So that's just something you need to be aware of, okay? So popular destinations like the University of Colorado can make, because they're so popular, and really popular with California kids, they can make the merit scholarship requirements really difficult. For really a measly $6,000 scholarship as an outsider at CU, it requires at least a 3.85 GPA and 1360 SAT score. I mean, that's rough. Now, on the other hand, there's these state schools that have to try harder. They don't have the Rocky Mountains right next to them, right? Or it's not, everybody's not beating a path to the door. And they are much more generous with scholarships and easier in terms of qualifying. For instance, University of Maine, who has billboards in the Northeast that says, hey, come to University of Maine, we'll give you a great deal, right? And they do. They basically give really great scholarships to students. For instance, a California student with a 3.0 GPA and an 1120 SAT or 22 ACT can attend the University of Maine with a $16,000 a year scholarship. Basically, they're saying, if you come to our school, you won't pay any more than you would pay at UC Berkeley. So, to lower the price of a state university, besides looking at your own state schools, families should also consider, I would suggest, throwing a wider net when looking at schools. Actually, some of the most inexpensive state schools in the country, not only for residents but non-residents, are the interior west schools. Like University of Utah or University of Montana State or University of Idaho, some of those. Also, you can explore becoming a resident of a state even though you're attending already school there. Some states have rigorous requirements in terms of becoming a resident, but there are some schools that it's easier. For instance, Jessica, who was a gifted dancer, and her mom was a friend of mine, and I suggested, and she needed a lot of help. Her husband had died without life insurance. She had breast cancer, and one of the schools I suggested was University of Utah, which has an internationally renowned dance program. So Jessica actually, I said, this is one of the states that it's easy to become a resident. And so after her first year, she got scholarship money from the school, she got a dance scholarship, and she applied to be a resident. She had to get a driver's license, stay over the summer, get a job, register to vote, whatever. She did it, and she saved over at least $58,000 by becoming a resident of the state. Another one that my own Alma University of Missouri, it's easy to do that too. So there are some states that it's easy. Now, let's talk about how private schools make awards. About 30% of students actually four-year students attend private schools. As I said earlier, the sticker price for private, well, actually, 89% of students at private colleges receive an institutional price break. I don't have it in here, but the average tuition price break at private schools today is at a historic high. It's 56.7%. And that's because most schools have to try harder to attract students to their schools. For affluent families, nearly all private scholarships give merits. All private schools give merit scholarships. Keep in mind, nearly all, but I'll tell you the ones that don't. Keep in mind that affluent families will, in some cases, qualify for some need-based aid at expensive private colleges and universities. The more expensive the school, the more likely families will qualify for some need-based aid. And as I said before, why these discounts? It's because, except for the most popular schools, it's a buyer's market. Now, I kind of like to talk about this in terms of how schools charge, in terms of college sweatshirts, the wow factor. That will impact who gets a deal, right? So, sweatshirts with a big wow factor, these like Harvard, right? These colleges are more likely to give superior need-based financial aid if you qualify, but little to no merit scholarships because they don't have to. On the other hand, the wow list, and this is a vintage sweater from my daughter's school, These schools are more likely to give generous need-based aid than elite universities, okay? Like they could give it to almost everybody. But they give merit scholarship, so they're less likely to give generous need-based aid, but they give merit scholarships to almost everybody. They can also have a lower sticker price to start with. And I'm going to give you an example of my son's school, Beloit College here. You can see here, this is from federal statistics, and you'll actually, when you get that resource guide from the school, the Ultimate College List Builder, it's going to have these statistics for like over 800 schools. Okay? So this school, 97% of the freshmen got some kind of price break from Beloit, which represents 382 kids. And the average, the right-hand column, the average award was over $28,000. That's what the typical kid gets at this school. Now, it could be need-based, or in some cases it's merit scholarships, or it could be a combination of both. Now, let's contrast that with Stanford, where only 50% of the students get something at Stanford. That represents 870 students. The average award is much higher, 48,000, okay? But this is really, I'm very cynical about higher ed world. I used to be cynical about the Wall Street because I covered that. And I was very cynical, and I thought, oh, when I start covering colleges, this is going to be much nicer. But it's not. It's like just as, I become just as cynical about this world. And you look at this, so half of the students at Stanford are extremely wealthy. To not qualify for financial aid at Stanford, you have to make a lot of money. So, and this is exactly what the research has shown, is the kids who are really wealthy don't need to go to Stanford, but the Stanfords of the world want to teach those kids. Okay, so that just shows the 50% who do get something, it's all need-based aid. There's not a single kid at Stanford who doesn't qualify for aid. There's no merit scholarship money at this school. So a lot of extremely rich kids at this school. Now, these sweatshirt pricing also correlates with U.S. News and World Report's rankings. Okay, so I gave this example. This is I pulled this out of a lesson from my online class. I'm looking at Ohio tuition prices, right? And on the left-hand column, like Oberlin, Kenyon, Denison, you can see those are the rankings of U.S. News rankings of these schools, liberal arts colleges. And you can see the rankings totally correlate with how much these schools charge in tourist tuition. Okay? And it's the same, there's only 2 schools in Ohio that are in the U.S. News' National University category, but Case Western, University of Dayton, which is a Catholic school, they also, correlate too. And it's not always going to be like that, but the higher up in the rankings, the more schools can charge. The other thing that you need to know, unfortunately, as we're on the West Coast, there's a lot of things, great things to live out here, obviously, and a lot of kids want to go to school out here, but the reality is universities on the West and East Coast tend to have higher prices and higher net prices. If you look at federal statistics, it shows which schools have the highest net prices, meaning after you're deducting the average tuition discounts, there's a lot of East and West Coast universities, private universities on that list. So, bottom line on this is price cuts can stretch farther when the sticker prices are lower and the sweatshirts aren't as impressive. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about building a college list, because I think some people, for those who think, all right, yeah, I'm willing to, maybe we should look around. Maybe we shouldn't just fish in the same pond everybody else is and being stressed out, is my kid going to get into UCLA or, UCSD or Berkeley or Stanford, right? Like, okay, I'm willing to look at that. Okay, so what are some ways that you can build a college list? First of all, I think you need to understand that there are 3 main types of schools. There's research universities, there's master's level universities, and there's colleges, okay? The characteristics of research universities, which are, the ones that most people know about. Not only the Ivies, but the UCs, the flagships of every state, like the University of Texas at Austin, the school I went to, University of Missouri, Columbia, Stanford, schools like that, Notre Dame, USC. Okay, they have, obviously, research universities have a lot of majors, lots of cultural and sporting activities. The thing that you need to know about research universities, or maybe I think doesn't register with people, is professor research. The professors there are taught to do research. They're not there, their goal is not to be the best teacher, most of them. They are there to do their research, bring in grant money, make a name for themselves. The second priority of research universities is graduate education, educating the next generation of PhDs, right? And it's those graduate students who are heavily involved in teaching undergrads, okay? The number 3 priority at a research university are the undergrads who pay for a lot of what the operations of the place. You can have, some students will have many of their classes in large lecture halls where it's just kind of passive learning. It's not always going to be the same, it really depends on your major, but I think most kids just look at the school and go, oh, I want to go there, without really examining, well, what kind of education are you going to get there, what's your major? Now, one way that research universities have tried to be nicer to undergrads is by offering honors colleges to try to make it more of a personal education. So that's something that when you're looking at research universities to see, do they have honors colleges where maybe you can get some smaller classes or actually have a professor as an advisor maybe, or getting priority registration, those sorts of things. So that's something to actually look for, particularly at state universities that they're very common at many state universities. Now, this is a characteristic of liberal arts colleges. Those are the ones where, you've never heard of these schools, like the ones my kids went to. A good nice thing about these, and one thing that I was attracted to them, is undergraduates are the number 1 priority of these schools because that's all there are. There aren't any graduate students. So they're small schools, they have small classes. Some kids are going to rebel against these because they're like, oh my gosh, it's no bigger than my high school, right? There are fewer academic majors, fewer if any vocational majors, so if you want to be a nurse or an engineer, they don't have that. The liberal arts colleges have 3-2 programs where you can go 3 years and do all your science and then go to an engineering school, typically Columbia or Washington University in St. Louis, and finish up and get an engineering degree. Because there are no graduate students, professors have to teach the classes. They are hired with more of that in mind, like, what are your teaching skills? Finding mentors are easy. And kids are more likely at these schools to attend graduate school. In fact, I love to show these charts. This is from Reed College, which is a real powerhouse of kids who want to get PhDs. And you can see here, this is from the National Science Foundation, where the students, percentage of grads at a school go on to get doctoral degrees. And you can see many of these schools in this chart are liberal arts colleges. And the same here, if we break it down by specific fields of study. You'll see some elite research universities there, like Caltech and Harvard, but there's a lot of, and MIT, but there's a lot of colleges there too. And then the third type of school is master's level university, which is, those schools typically don't have as many PhD programs, or maybe they don't have any. They have master's degrees. They can be a hybrid between a college and a research university, so they can be more undergraduate focused, but not always. So I think these are the trickiest to evaluate. Many Catholic universities are in this category. They're typically medium-sized schools. If you're looking for these in U.S. News and World Report, want to see what are these schools, you can look in their regional university category. And it's really, I think, important to, when you're looking at these schools, to judge just where do undergrads fit in at these schools. Okay. One thing that I think is super important when no matter what type of school you're looking at, and I think, hey, try to explore I would recommend exploring all 3 types, it's important to look at the academic departments of of the major your child thinks he or she wants to go into. Because, and in fact, if you could just, this is a blog post I wrote on my website, so if you just do digging deeper when researching colleges, or you could just even do researching academic departments, and it's way out, it's near the top of the Google search, yay. But look at that, because you could have, say, a great business school, but you could have a lousy biology department, right? And you want to see, how do kids, do they have any connection with professors? How big are the classes? Where do these kids, go when they graduate? What kind of jobs do they have? What kind of internships? So that's the kind of thing. And in this blog post, I list a lot of questions to ask. And also in that handout, for those of you who want it, the 100 questions to ask, I include things in there from ask about academic departments. Now, for some resources to generate ideas for college lists, I would say use U.S. News strictly as a tip sheet. Like, for goodness sake, do not believe the numbers. I used to be a write for U.S. News, and I quit because I was disgusted by the U.S. and the college rankings. They're horrible. They're just so destructive for so many different reasons that I can't go into tonight. But it's just good to get some ideas. Please don't believe the numbers, okay? And also, I think a couple of, it can be helpful as a tip sheet, is particularly for, if you are interested in, let's like see what these liberal arts colleges are all about, or these regional universities, which are the master's level schools. U.S. News has them all on one list, so it can be convenient just to start looking at some of them. And if you want to learn why college rankings are so destructive, Google New Yorker college rankings, okay, and you will get a wonderful synopsis of that. And here's a book that I like. It's just a book of lists. It's called The College Finder. This is a book you cannot get on Amazon. But if you Google Steve Antonoff, who wrote the book, you can find it. It's a great little resource. This is the 4th edition. And basically, it's just a list of schools that he thinks are good, or others that he thinks highly of in the higher ed world. He consults tons of different people to create lists of like the best schools that have econ departments, or the best biology departments, or the schools, near cities, or grouped by religion, or all, it is really just book of lists. Now, these certainly doesn't mean that these are the only schools worth it, like the best chemistry schools, but anyway, it's once again, it can generate some ideas for you. And then this is a website that I really like called Educate to Career, which is an ugly, ugly website, but it's got cool stuff on it. This is actually like kind of the nonprofit arm of a job search intelligence, which is based in Los Angeles, that specializes in college admissions through outcome data, labor market analysis, salary data. I love what these guys do. It's major. They're just a bunch of data scientists. And you can see here, they say that their database is the functional equivalent of a longitudinal study of millions of persons, followed from high school through 10 years of the labor market. And they've got things on their website that you can't get anywhere else. The federal government could give this information out, but they're prohibited by Congress, passed a law saying you can't give out this information. In fact, the guy who runs Job Search Intelligence was telling me he got, right before the Obama administration, and then he got a call from a higher up in the Department of Education saying, we love what you guys are doing, and we're so glad that, you have accurate stuff that we cannot release. So one of the things that you can see on their site is their own little college rankings, which once again, I would just use it as a tip sheet, but their rankings, you can see how they rank. The percentage of grads employed in occupations which utilize their study, the average salary earned by recent grads, percentage of students employed within 1 year, different things, including tuition and state net cost. They're big on that, so some of the state schools are going to look really good. You got to remember this is because they're more reasonable for a lot of students. Keep in mind that it's only, the tuition is based on in-state students and not out-of-state. So anyway, these are just some of the schools that were high on the ranking. They do this every year. And all of these schools, they rank over, I think, 1,200 schools. All of these, you don't see the rankings, but they're all have almost the same rankings. Like they're all super bunched up together in terms of all those methodologies, what schools, this is like the schools they say are doing a bang-up job. And you can see there's some that you're very well known to you, as well as some you've probably never heard of. But that's what I like is to like start thinking outside the box and thinking of other types of schools. But you can get this for free on their website. The other thing that I think is super cool, okay, is they have an ability to, and I thought they actually show the salaries, real salaries of students who are new grads, first year out, what their salaries are for a particular major in a particular school. Okay, and I use this as an illustration. Somebody who was in my class was from New Jersey, and she had contacted me and said, well, my son is trying to decide between the state school, New Jersey Institute of Technology, or Drexel, and Drexel seems like a more, to her, a better school, or more well known, and look at the price is so much different. Those are the sticker prices, and the kid actually had a scholarship from the New Jersey State School. And so I said, yeah, let's look at this Educate to Careers tool. And this is how you get to, you go to Educate to Career, click on Consuls and Consultants, and then you will look at college majors and outcomes, okay? This was Drexel. This is what it looks like if you use it. And it shows for mechanical engineering grads at Drexel, these are the major categories of careers that they're in. And you can see the total, the average for the at Drexel new grad is 63,300. Now look at the state school, it's 63,400. Now, would you want to pay all that extra for Drexel when you see, really, the salaries are the same, right? Why would you do that, right? And sadly, your kid would get. Basically, the research that Job Search Intelligence has done over the years, you can sum it up by saying high salaries are correlated with practical majors, salaries are correlated with test scores correlate with family wealth. Liberal arts students can do well if they're from affluent families. They can major in whatever the heck they want, or if they've acquired practical skills while getting those liberal arts majors. Okay, okay, so now I'm going to switch over to the financial stuff that you should know. One thing that absolutely everybody should be using are net price calculators. How many of you have heard of net price calculators? Okay, not enough. Okay, so these are invaluable. They're federally mandated. Every school has to have one. These provide a personal estimate of what 1 year of college will cost. Okay, so you will provide information that you would need from like your income tax return, right, or your non-retirement investment accounts. And some schools that give merit aid, if it's a good calculator, they'll ask about your kid's GPA or test scores, things like that. And then they will calculate, will your child get money from the federal government, the state government, the college themselves, right? And then they subtract that from the cost of attendance, and that's your net price. And that's the meaningful price, is the net price. So really, this is a crucial step in finding schools that will be more affordable. You know, you should be using the net price calculator for every school if money is an issue. And you can use them strategically, right? Like I would say, when you're creating a college list with your kid, you're looking at some schools, say, let's use the net price calculator on the school. Let's see what it's going to cost. And if it's going to cost a lot, you could say, hey, you can't apply there. Or keep in mind, if this comes back and this is what the school really charges us, you're not going, right? Which will eliminate a lot of the tears and crying when kids, you know, get their awards and they go, but I worked so hard for this, and I want to go to this school, and they're crying, and you're like, oh my gosh, should we like ruin our financial life so our kid can go to their favorite school? No. But, you know, it's hard to say no sometimes. do with net price calculators is you can see, like for some, and I'm going to talk about this home equity, that you can see, all right, plug in a net price calculator and then plug in your home equity and then take it out and run the calculator and see if there's any difference, right? Or test scores, if you're wondering, oh, should my child, take the SAT or ACT again, right? You can plug a higher test score in and see, would it be higher, would it be worthwhile at this school? Would we get more money if he or she had a higher test score? So where can you find each school's calculator? Well, they're often buried on schools' websites. A lot of schools don't, at least initially, did not like doing this. I think a lot of them just don't want to, but they have to by federal law. So if you can just Google the name of the school and net price calculator, you should find it. Now, of course, accurate net price calculator results won't be available till later years in high school when you know what the kid's GPA is going to be or test scores, right? You can still fiddle around with it before you've got an idea of what kind of stats your kid's going to generate, but it's going to be less helpful early on. You just have to guess. Now, having sung the praises of these, there's about half of the schools in this country use bad net price calculators. They're the federal template, and they just ask a handful of questions. They don't inquire about assets at all, which is crazy. They don't calculate merit awards at all, and so they can be pretty worthless. One giveaway is if you see this little icon, that means it's a bad calculator. Now, not all schools use this, this little graphic, but if it does, wow, I'm just wasting my time really just even using this thing. So absolutely you should be using net price calculators. Another great tool is an expected family contribution calculator. How many have heard of that? Okay, a few more. Okay. Those are a great tool. It should really be your first step because you'll find out, oh, what are schools going to expect me to pay for college? And you're going to, what you would be expected to pay at a minimum for 1 year of college costs. And when you use the net price or the EFC calculator, you're going to use some of the same information from the net price calculator. It's your tax return, your non-retirement assets, and plug it in. I would say you find out what your EFC is as soon as freshman year in high school, or even earlier, just to give you some idea. Now, for those of you, most of you probably, your kids are older, that's okay. Just use it now and get some sense. Because that's what people ask, well, will I qualify for financial aid or not? Who knows? It depends on the generosity of the school, but also the price of the school. And so once you get your EFC, let's say your EFC is 30 and the school costs 65, then you would have to pay 30 and the school ideally would kick in $35,000 of help. Most schools aren't going to be that generous. Some of them are, but at least you'll get some idea of what a school would expect you to pay at a minimum. And the EFC calculator that I like is the College Board's. So if you just Google College Board and EFC calculator, you will find it. So this would be a great activity for you for this week or the weekend is to do that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how assets impact financial aid. Parents often worry about how their investments will impact aid, but for many families, it's not going to hurt aid chances. And here's why. Not all parent assets are counted, and those that are assessed is at a low rate. So I always urge families to save as much as you can. For every $10,000 you save, it reduces need-based aid by no more than $564. So it's always good to save. What factors will impact financial aid will depend on where you apply to college. Most schools only use the FAFSA to determine aid eligibility. Almost all state schools do, including the state schools here. And then there are roughly 200 schools, almost all private, that use the CSS profile to determine who get their own institutional money, and these are they're pickier and they ask more questions about your finances. These are just some examples of some profile schools. As I said, they're almost all private schools. To find these profile schools, you can just Google CSS profile and then you can click the participating school list link. Now, the two aid formulas, the profile and the FAFSA, in some ways they're similar, I mean they're the same, in some ways they aren't. The profile assesses parent assets at up to 5%, and the FAFSA assesses parent assets at up to 5.64%. So let's take a look at the FAFSA first. The FAFSA ignores qualified retirement accounts like IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, all that, Roth IRAs. They also ignore equity in the primary home, which would be great for people around here who've got a lot of equity in their house. But then again, you know, state schools here, you know, if you have too much income, you're not getting anything from the state schools anyway. The FAFSA also ignores annuities and cash value of life insurance and personal possessions. And this is what the FAFSA cares about: education accounts, prepaid tuition, custodial accounts, checking, savings, fixed deposit, trust funds, cash, all this other stuff. Okay, that's what they care about. Now, the profile cares about all this stuff too, what I just said. They care about all that. And they also, just like the FAFSA, ignores qualified retirement accounts and qualified retirement annuities, but they do count non-qualified annuities, adjusted net worth of a business or farm, and sometimes the cash value of life insurance. So sometimes you get these guys, I think some of them pretty scummy, who, you know, try to scare families and go, oh, you know, the way to get more money for college is basically, they ultimately tell you, is to hide your money, right? They want to sell you annuities or life insurance. People approach you with that, I would just run, right? Just, they don't even know what they're really talking about. They just want to sell things. Now, unlike the FAFSA, most profile schools assess equity in a primary home, okay, which could be a problem for people out here. The home equity would be assessed at up to 5%, just like all the other assets. And here's an example. So if you have $250,000 home equity times 5%, that means your eligibility for need-based aid would drop by $12,500. Put another way, your EFC will go up by $12,500. Now, there are three ways that profile schools treat home equity. They assess the full home equity value, they link home equity to parents' income, or they ignore home equity altogether. There's some few schools that just ignore it. Linking income to home equity, let's give you an example of that, okay? Now let's say that without any linking, you have $400,000 in home equity, and basically that means your need for financial aid drops by $20,000, which is brutal, right? So let's say the family that has $400,000 in equity has a family income of $100,000. So, and a school, let's say there's schools that cap it at 2%, some cap it at less than that. So if you cap it at 2%, that gives you 200,000 times 5%, you get 10,000, which means instead of having your ability to get eligibility for need-based aid, instead of dropping by 20,000, it would drop by 10,000. So it's, you know, it's an improvement. Now, there's no one official way to assess your home equity. I would say the best one, because schools are going to ask you, how much is your house worth? I mean, you know, when did you buy it? Because they want to get some sense that way. And how much is it worth? You know, what's your home equity? I think one of the best sources for, you know, what your house is worth is the Housing Price Index Calculator of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, because it's it doesn't seem up to date. So, anyway, surprise, surprise, federal government. So anyway, I would suggest using that one, but you could use Zillow or, you know, comps in the neighborhood or whatever, but you try to get the one that's got, you know, the lowest value. Also, you can ask colleges what their home equity policy is, and sometimes they don't tell you. That's why it can be helpful to have those net price calculators and put your equity in and then take it out and see if the numbers change. Yeah. The other thing is, now colleges don't broadcast this, but some of them are willing to entertain an appeal about how they've assessed the family's home equity. So parents shouldn't hesitate to appeal. And really, it's kind of cynical on colleges' parts to say, oh yeah, well, we'll entertain an appeal. Who would even know to appeal? Like, people don't even know how these numbers come up, right? Like, now, here's something about the marital status and how it impacts financial aid. The FAFSA and the CSS profile treat divorce and separation differently for financial aid purposes. In cases of divorce and separation, the FAFSA only cares about the assets and income from the custodial parent. Okay? And the custodial parent, it's a weird definition, is the one whom the child has lived with for the majority of a 12-month period ending on the day the FAFSA is filed. So if you file it like October 1st of this coming year, or this year, you go back to October 1st, 2018 and say, where did the child live the majority of the year, which could be 6 months and a day. Factors that are relevant in determining who the custodial parent is which parent claims the child on the taxes or who pays for child support. It doesn't matter. Now, if the custodial parent gets remarried, then the FAFSA will assess the assets and income from the new spouse. Some couples believe that a prenup will keep them from having to share the new spouse's assets and income, and that's just not true. So because the FAFSA ignores the non-custodial parent, the parent should be strategic about where the child resides. If need-based stay is a possibility, then consider having the child live at the lower wage earner for at least 51% of the time. Now, for the CSS profile, it's a little different. Most profile schools will require the non-custodial parent to share their financial information too. Typically, profile schools want to know about the assets and income of the two original parents, right? Whether or not they've been remarried. And you can see on the profile, if you go to CSS profile, you will see a list of the schools, and what you would do is look under the heading CSS profile non-custodial parents, and you'll see which schools require the non-custodial parent to file the profile and share his or her financial information. So if your child is going to be applying to a profile schools, ask each institution when it's applicable, how it handles divorce or separation. Separation is typically handled the same way as, like for the FAFSA, the same way as if you're divorced. Okay, so one last thing, and I told you I'm going to get this done, and I'm speeding through it. Okay, I wanted to show one little cool tool that you can use to find out what individual schools care about in terms of admission factors, right? Now, of course, you all probably know the most important admission factors are your kids' GPA, grades in college prep classes, standardized test scores, and the strength of the child's curriculum, right? But schools can all be different in terms of what they care about the most or what they couldn't care less about, and it's possible to look at individual schools and find that out. A great resource, there's different places to get this, but I like college data, so collegedata.com. You can go there and you can type in the name of any school, and then you're going to click on the admission link, and you will see this little cool table that has 19 admission factors, okay, and each one, the school rates what is very important considered and not considered. So I'm looking at UCLA, and you can see some of this seems like, oh, no-brainer, like of course they're interested in the rigor of the school, what the kid took, the GPA and the test scores, right? But what's interesting for a big research university is they're very, very interested in the essay, right, those personal statements. And it makes sense because this is a school, I think UCLA gets more applications than any state school in the country. And well, all the UCs get, deluge, most of them. So how do you differentiate between all these kids that are all 4.0, 4.2, 4.3 kids, right? That's who gets into UCLA. You have to be in the top 10% of your class almost entirely, right? Those are the kids. They're super, super smart, high achievers. So one way that you can differentiate them is through the essay. So that is seeing these factors, go, wow, okay, my kid really needs to focus on really knocking it out of the ballpark. But other things UCLA couldn't care less about, like, for instance, their level of an applicant's interest, for instance. They don't care if you come to the campus. They really don't. They don't want to be bothered, just apply and then we'll let you know, right? Other schools, it's super important that you show up and show interest. Like Ithaca College in New York, they care about, look at that, level of applicants' interest, very important. If you don't show interest in them, they're not going to show interest in you. So that is good to know. Now, where all these statistics come from is something called a common data set, and all these come directly from the school. They fill this out every year. It's a document. You can see most schools' common data set by just Googling the term and the name of the school, and you will get a lot of information about the school, not just about admission factors, but a lot of other things, including financial aid, merit awards, all sorts of things. It's just a standardized document that schools fill out for U.S. News and World Report, the College Board, and others who are voracious about getting statistics from schools, right? About all sorts of things. And so these schools, many of these schools, put it all in something called a common data set and just allow these collegiate publishers to go at it. And typically they just put them on their website for anybody to see them. So that's where these come from. So that is all I've got for now. I can't believe I got through it all. But I don't think I've ever talked this fast, but now I've got time for questions. So, yes?
So one little bit of information I heard, which I'm curious about your take on, in respect to like UCLA.
Yeah.
I was told that it was super hard to get in the freshman class, but it's much easier to transfer in. And that UCLA, according to the transfer students, is primarily a school of transfers. And I'm wondering, have you heard anything like that?
Well, California is a little unusual in that just because of the master day plan that they created back in the 1960s, they planned that most students would start at community colleges. Now, in a lot of states, that's not true. They start at four-year schools. But just the way it is, originally, it was like the top 10% of kids could go to the UCs, the top 30% could go, some of them will be going to the CSUs, and then everybody else would go to community colleges. So I would not recommend and community college here can be a great way to go. It's very inexpensive. You can have, basically some of the same classes you're getting at UCLA or, San Jose State or any of these places, and yet they're smaller classes. You actually, are in a small class, can actually talk to a professor. So, but I think, frankly, oftentimes it's better to, if you can, start at a four-year school, because frankly, most kids never get out of the community college system. Now I think you're far more likely, if you're an affluent kid and you start at community college, you are far more likely to transfer to a four-year school. And studies have showed if you get to that point and you do transfer to a four-year school, you're going to graduate at the same rates as kids who started at a four-year school.
I just want to add that my daughter is a tour guide at UCLA. She's a junior there, and UCLA of the UCs does have the most transfer students. That's a fact that she shares with us.
But yeah, there's a lot of transfer kids going to these because they have to get them through. I mean, they have, think of all the kids going to community college in the state who want to get four-year degrees. That's just the way the system is here. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of loans?
Oh, sure.
That's on those
Yeah.
kids and the families?
Yeah, thanks, because I was trying to cram all this in. I didn't get to this. Thank you. So the best loan is the federal direct loan. Okay, so that is the student loan, and you can borrow the first year $5,500, the second year $6,500, the third and fourth year $7,500. If you go more than 4 years, you can borrow up to $31,000. Okay, the student. Now, if you have parents who don't qualify for the federal college loan, students can borrow more from the direct loan. Like if a parent has had bankruptcy or foreclosure, things like that, and they're precluded from getting the federal parent loan. But that's the best loan, is the federal direct loan for students, because it has a safety net. And so if a kid graduates and is underemployed or unemployed, you can get into a program called income-based repayment where you can pay based on essentially what you're making at the time rather than what you owe. So, and you also can have some deferments. It's really, no one should be defaulting on federal student loans. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity not to do that. Now, the federal parent loan is pretty crummy. It's the plus loan. It is a high interest rate. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's over 7%. The federal government makes a ton of money on federal loans. There is no safety net for parents. There's also, for every dollar you borrow through the federal plus loan, it's a 4% fee, which is crazy. There's also private loans out there. One of the things I would look at is like credit unions. They've been getting into the student loan business, and they can have better rates or more friendlier terms than the big guys. There aren't that many big players in it left, but there's Sallie Mae, which has had many problems over the years. People complain about them. Wells Fargo is another one, but yeah, I would look at some credit unions.
If the college lists that they're assigning this amount of money to you as a federal parent loan, do you have to do it that way, or that's just their suggestion?
Say that
Your
again?
financial aid package,
Yeah.
that college lists like
Yeah.
4 different kinds of loans.
Right.
I haven't figured it all out yet. Do you have to do what?
No, so yeah, when you get your financial aid letter, it will say like, maybe a merit scholarship, grants, federal direct loan, the student loan, maybe parent plus loan, right? You just pick what you want. You don't have to take any of that, okay?
They're just trying to max out the.
Well, because they want to make it look like, oh, it's all covered, right? Yeah, don't take more than you need. Absolutely not, right? And schools have terrible financial aid letters, typically. The worst one I think I've ever seen was University of Arizona. It made it look like the kid was going for free, but they had written, they came up with descriptions of loans without saying loans. It was awful. The other thing I should say about when you get financial aid letters, what is absolutely important is finding out, asking the school, or knowing what your EFC is. Remember that expected family contribution where I said, you can do that early on, see what you might have to pay? Well, the EFC is good to know also at the end of the process. So you get this letter, right? And it says, you're getting $20,000 or $35,000 or whatever it is, and this is what you owe. Is that a good award or not? You don't know unless you know what your EFC is. And schools often don't put it on there because they don't want you to know. So what you should do is ask the school, what is your expected family contribution? And when you fill out the FAFSA, which you have to do for your application for the student aid to get any kind of need-based aid from anybody, the FAFSA will have, when you get it back and it says student aid report, you get your results back, it'll have at the top what your EFC is. So if it's a school that only uses the FAFSA, you'll know what your EFC is. But if you're looking at all these private schools that use the profile, every private school can have their own EFC. And if it's not on your award letter, contact the school and ask them what it is. Because how else are you going to be able to evaluate if this is a good award or not? Yes?
Does or how does a 529 impact need-based financial aid done by someone other than the peer?
Okay, so 529s are a great way to save for college. It's one of the ones that is assessed, but it's only assessed at 5% or up to 5.64%. And oftentimes it's not even that because I didn't get into it, but both the profile and the FAFSA allow you to automatically shelter some of your non-retirement money. Okay, so it's a great way to save for college. Now, what if, for instance, a grandparent, right, is saving, right, for college, if you're so lucky? It's great that happens, and as long as the grandparents' money stays in the account, nothing's going to happen. What happens, though, is if the grandparent takes it out and helps pay for college, right, the child is supposed to put whatever the contribution was to pay for the college, let's say $10,000, the child is supposed to put that on his or her income tax return as untaxed income. I think most people don't do that or wouldn't even know to do that, but that is what is supposed to happen. Once you do that, the FAFSA will see, oh, look at all that income that kid has. We're going to assess it at 50%. Now, kids get to shelter some of their money, so if a kid has a job, your kid has a job, they can, I think right now you can shelter up to $6,800 a year or something, and that's not going to hurt their aid chances, right? So if the kid doesn't have a job and the grandparents kick in $5,000 for the year to help pay for college, there's nothing that's going to happen. But if you're having a lot of money, right, being pulled out, it's supposed to be assessed at 50%. Now, the good thing is you can get around this if grandparents or anybody else wants to help with college costs and family has a chance for financial aid. If they don't, none of this matters. Grandparents can help whenever they want. But if they have a chance for financial aid, what grandparents should do is wait until the parents have filed for financial aid for the child's junior year in college, which will be in the second semester of the child's sophomore year in college. They'll be applying for junior year, right? And now you use 2-year-old tax returns. So basically, bottom line is, the grandparents file and help pay for college after the parents have filed for junior year in college, the second semester of the kid's sophomore year. None of this will ever come up in the income tax return or the FAFSA. Won't care. So that's how I would say, for generous outsiders, just wait until the second half of the kid's sophomore year in college, and then you're fine. Yes?
You just mentioned something about 2 years of tax returns.
Two-year-old tax returns. See, they did that because it used to be you had to file your current tax returns, right? Which was a hassle, like getting all this in, right? In fact, and getting it in a time, like the state of California for Cal grants, you have to have that in by March 2nd. It's coming up. So for anybody who's a senior, like I was getting my nails done today, and this woman had no idea. She's a single mom, and her kid wants to go to San Jose State. And I'm like, have you filed the FAFSA? And she said, what? And I mean, she would qualify for the Cal grant. I'm like, oh my gosh. I wrote it all down for her because English wasn't very good. And I'm like, you have to get this filed this week, or you're not getting anything. I mean, you're not getting a Cal grant. So anyway, yes, 2-year-old tax returns. So kids who are going to school in 2019, later this year, their parents will be using 2017 taxes. Okay, and it's just so that you won't have that rush to get your taxes done. I mean, it's great for parents now. Yes?
In terms of the net price calculator, what I understand is if you're doing this calculation that's based on cost of the school and the amount of aid the kids are going to get, how do you know how much you're going to get if you haven't done the aid letter? It's basically an estimate, correct? Isn't that the information?
Yeah, I mean, it's an estimate, right? And so they try their best. That's why schools don't really like it, but they have to, based on, I mean, if it's a school that does merit aid, they're going to ask about GPA or test scores, right? They can give you some kind of idea of it, what your assets are. But another thing you can do is ask the school how accurate is your net price calculator. For instance, a school sometimes I use as an example is Fordham, which has terrible financial aid, but like a lot of Catholic research universities, but they have a great calculator, and it even says on there like 80-something% of students get within 5% of what we say they're going to pay. Yes?
You talked about the wow t-shirt factor.
Right.
But I'm still not clear, like, how do you find the colleges that give out the most merit scholarships? Is that basically you're saying that?
The schools that, that aren't, highly, the ones at the top of U.S. News rankings, right? And also, schools that aren't oftentimes in cities on the coasts because they don't have to because people want to live there, kids want to live there. So schools that, aren't on everybody's list, that aren't in major cities, that are typically master's level schools, liberal arts colleges, or state research universities that aren't, the most popular, that aren't, top of the rankings. Yes?
For merit-based scholarships, do they have you fill out CSS profile or FAFSA, or is that a totally separate
Yeah, so if you are not going to qualify for need-based aid, like you know what your EFC is, you've run the net price calculators, you don't want to borrow through the federal government, right? So there can be no reason why you would file for financial aid. Because, I mean, you could ask the school, well, do you require us filing the FAFSA for merit scholarships? And it's very rare that is true. Like, I had a friend whose kid, they're both, one's a Superior Court judge, the other's an attorney down in San Diego, and this kid went to Georgia Tech as engineering school, and they weren't going to get any aid, but they were told, oh, she wants a merit scholarship, you have to file the FAFSA, so they did. Yes? Yeah?
So from what you said, am I correct in assuming that the GPA is one of the biggest things that normally schools would be consideration?
Yeah, a GPA test scores, you can look on that, the college data to see, specific schools. But you got to keep in mind that what is a good GPA, what will get you, into a school or money is going to vary a lot, right? Like, if it's a school that, people haven't heard of, right, you're not going to, what you need to get into the school is going to be far less than if you're aiming for UCLA, right? So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. UCLA every year does this survey of about 250,000 freshmen at four-year schools across the country, and every year the results are about the same. It's public and private schools, and it shows that about 75% of students get into their first choice school, right? It's really not hard to get into college. It just seems like it when you're here. And everybody is aiming for the small group of schools. And they feel like, if I don't get into these, my life is over. I mean, it's crazy, right? So just keep that in mind. Most kids can get into four-year schools. It's pretty darn easy if you just throw a wider net.
All right, I think that is an excellent point to stop on. I know I put 2 kids through college and grad school, and you guys have a lot of really great, really accurate information tonight. So we're going to stand here for a few minutes, but thank you all for coming.
Thank you.